Good evening. My name is Paul Cook. I'm chair of the Concord Cemetery Committee. I want to welcome you all on this pleasant fall night, coming all the way out here for this meeting. I appreciate you making the trip. The Cemetery Committee to my left. Let me introduce you to the committee and tell you briefly why we're here, and introduce you to the cemetery superintendent and cemetery supervisor, and a word about why we're here. So next to me, or rather at the end, is Whitney Kocher-Wynn, who is our vice chair. Carol Harney is here in the middle. Kimberly O'Connor is next to me, and Andrea Solomon is between Whitney and Carol. And to my right, Dan Rowley is the cemetery superintendent, who has done a really marvelous job in organizing everything that we are doing tonight, including lots of trips to various cemeteries around Boston, and Tish Hopkins, who is the cemetery supervisor, and who, if any of you ever taken a walk in the cemetery, you surely have run into Tish. She's there all the time. We are here because the cemetery has been interested over the past couple of years in alternative burial options. We had a couple of requests a couple of years ago for mausoleum sites, which we had not been offering in a long time, many years, decades. And so over a period of the past 2 years, we've done a lot of research and organized the various ways that this could be presented. And tonight we wanted to offer it to the public and get your feedback, get your sense of what you think about these options, and we have a conversation. This is a public information meeting, so we want to tell you what we're thinking about, but we want you to tell us what you think. In order to make that, really facilitate that, Dan has put together I think a very comprehensive and yet brief overview, and this PowerPoint presentation through which you will take us will show us some of the things that we've been thinking about, and as you watch it, I hope you'll be wondering or thinking what kind of questions you have to ask about the proposals that Dan will be showing. These are things that we've all talked about as a committee, and now we want to present them to you as the representatives of the townspeople of Concord. So as Dan gets started, we're going to get out of the way so we can watch too. Dan Rowley, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. We've been talking about these different options for quite some time now, and really at the point we'd like to have a conversation with every one of you just to learn what might interest you, what doesn't interest you, and any ideas and suggestions you may have. We meet the first Wednesday of every month at 135 Clyde Road. You're all invited to join us. We often don't get many people, so we're truly happy to have you here tonight. So the purpose, as Paul was saying, we've received requests for different burial options over the past few years. And when we received those requests, we took a step back. We had an old master plan. We took that out, we updated that, we set some priorities for ourselves, and we took a very close look at our available space at the Knoll. We ran some careful calculations because we wanted to first ensure that one of our top priorities is that we're not running out of space in the near term. And we answered that question. And we're guessing that we have somewhere in the vicinity of about 60 years left there for in-ground full burials and in-ground cremations. So we think we're pretty solid there. And we think we're in a position to talk about some of these options out there and get your input. This presentation is a very high-level presentation, and it's really just to get the conversation going. So tonight we have a number of options that we've looked at: family mausoleums, community mausoleums, columbarium, scattering gardens, and we're just starting to touch upon the green burial. We know that there's some interest out there. We've had a few conversations as a committee, but we haven't quite put as much effort as maybe some of these other things that have been a little bit more talked about. But it is obviously here tonight.
I have a quick question. What's a columbarium?
Columbarium, and I have a slide on it. So, okay, but it's a wall that cremated remains are stored in. Wanted to just take a quick moment to maybe recap the last 3 or 4 years I've been together with the cemetery committee. We've been very active. We've made some substantial improvements in the cemetery, thanks to the town of Concord. We received 2 community preservation grants for improvements, as well as 2 debt authorizations, and we've completed 2 phases of roadway, stone wall, and drainage improvements, totaling about $800,000, a little over $800,000. In the gray, you can see phase 1, and in the orange is phase 2, and we just are finishing up phase 2 now. This is just a before and after of Upland Ave, and this is the photo on the left, obviously, is the before photo. This was really the starting point for us to develop the capital plan to analyze our roads and get a sense of the overall condition, and that really got us rolling to realize that we really needed some serious funding. This is Pine Ridge Ave. We're just finishing up this phase now. Just a great before and after photo. We're wrapping up the Melvin Memorial Restoration Project. The project contractor, Daedalus, has been working on the memorial since late August, and he's nearing the end of that. He is currently working on the replacement slates. He's putting the new letters on them, and he hopes to install those in the next few weeks, weather permitting. So if by chance the weather turns cold, which it already has, and we're kind of teeter-tottering with the appropriate temperatures, we'll have to wait till the spring. I do want to mention, since everybody's here, we are planning a rededication ceremony, tentatively sometime in June. It'll be the 110th anniversary of the initial dedication. So stay tuned for more details on that. Want to mention the Friends of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Many of you here tonight. We have had a great collaboration with this group. A number of projects that we have worked on together and they have funded. To the left, 5 beautiful wooden carved entrance signs. We worked together on the lettering, the appropriate wording, and they were gracious enough to fund the installation, the purchase and installation of those signs. And those are really beautiful to the cemetery. Upper right-hand corner, some seasonal plantings they do to help beautify the cemetery. Again, nice addition. And the lower right-hand corner is a significant planting project that we worked on with them. They donated the work of a landscape architect to develop and design the screening between the 3rd and 4th gate, and then purchase all plant material, and Concord Public Works put that in. So it's been a great relationship, and we're very thankful for them. One of the options that we've looked at and we've had folks approach us is family mausoleums. These are above ground options where full caskets are essentially stored in crypts. This is just an example of one. We have an area that we are considering that we think may have been, it's in the older part of the cemetery. It's a significant investment for someone looking essentially at a lot cost. A couple $100,000 is what our market research is telling us. And the construction cost would be, on the purchaser of the mausoleum, including engineering, design, construction, slope stabilization, landscaping, other improvements. The area that we've looked at is the area near the Pope Tomb, which was constructed in the 1930s. That hillside along there, from what we understand to the best of our knowledge, was most likely intended to be for more mausoleums. There just seems no interest in many years, and that's the map for that area. We've actually just show you just what the additional spots would look like, and they're about 20 by 20. It's a common place for them to be placed in cemeteries. It's just 2 photos of how they've been tucked into a landscape. And that area along the road in the Pope Tomb is subject to a lot of erosion, and it is in need of some landscaping improvements just to control the area. And something of this could be an improvement to the overall landscape grounds of the cemetery. Another option we looked at is a community mausoleum, where the town would essentially build a building, and we would sell crypts individually, and full caskets would be entombed in the building. Something we would probably need space for in the knoll, and estimated construction costs would be significant in the $150,000 to close to $400,000 range, really depending on the design. So we would have to find a funding source. And in turn, we would look to sell those trips for somewhere between $7,000 to $30,000 to recoup the cost. It's a little different above ground option for folks if that's something that is interesting. On to columbarium. This is very common in a lot of cemeteries. It's an above ground structure where cremated remains are placed in niches, be constructed and owned by the town, and each niche would be sold individually to families. Memorialization would take place on the cover of the niche, and each niche could house 2 sets of cremated remains. And this is just an example. We have an area that we've looked at in the knoll. If you drive into the cemetery, you really can't see all that well, but up in this vicinity, there's an arrow. There's some existing infrastructure the town has already installed there for a different purpose that we'd like to utilize if possible. That includes a stairway. It also includes a ramp, a pathway, which should make it ADA accessible, and we would look to incorporate that into a design to use that. It's also worth noting that Concord averages about 65% cremations each year, so we are significantly using that. Just another example of a columbarium in a municipal cemetery. Just some costs that we'd be looking at, somewhere between $300 to $450 per niche, depending on our design and quality and quantity of the structure. The foundation somewhere between $3,000 and $9,000. Niches typically sell, from what we're seeing, somewhere between $775 to $5,000, depending on the columbarium and the cemetery. And we have a video of just some other examples of columbarium, again, just to provide some examples of different designs. The next alternative we looked at is a scattering garden, and that's a garden area where cremated remains are buried in an outer container. Shared memorials are typically used in common locations. So you see a picture on the left is just a nice pathway. There's a bench up in the left corner just for reflection or just to pause. And down on the right is an area where the burials take place, and there's no specific location where you're interred. It's just a general location. The scatterings are conducted in an area of ground cover and shade provided by mature trees. Granite tablets nearby are available for the memorialization of loved ones whose remains have been scattered. The construction costs would really depend on our design and once we selected a location.
A question for you. Are there any public health issues about burying and ashes? I mean, they don't want you to do that in public areas, and if you're making a place specifically for non-contained ashes.
The fact that it's called a scattering garden, but you're not actually scattering the.
Yeah, but you're burying, but you're not
Yes.
containing that.
No, the outer container would be like the big structure. It would still be in an urn.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But it actually, no, it's actually, the remains go directly in the ground. And that's a good question. I'm going to provide you an answer tonight, but I would rather get back to you, or
Well, to answer the question, I mean, cremated remains are essentially ground bone fragments. It's come out of a retort, they've been subjected to up to 1,800 degrees for up to 2 hours. It's not a health issue associated with that.
Why don't they want you to do that, like scattering in the ocean and doing things like that? Okay. 'cause they're not
Or
allowed
Disney,
to.
Disney doesn't want the ashes.
Thank you. This is a conceptual plan that we have. The town actually considered this at some point years ago about building a scattering garden. I'm not sure what the interest level was then, but certainly there was some to make this investment. So we're interested in learning if that's something that folks would be interested in. And the last topic is green burials. This one's, it's been out there a while. It's a little bit newer to us. We haven't had a lot of conversations as a group, but that's the burial of human remains in a biodegradable casket or shroud, which are interred without a concrete vault. Human remains are not embalmed. There's different levels of green burial as far as the equipment that's used and some of the different practices. This would require us opening a separate section, since there'd be limited use of machinery, including mowing equipment, and planting or a flat memorial stone may be used for memorialization, or there may be no marker if at all if the area is mapped. And this is probably the one that we've started to look at, but we're not quite there yet. And so that's my very general overview of the things that we're talking about. Love to open it up to questions and comments and invite the committee to come back up. I'd like to ask everybody to sign up for our cemetery listserv, where we send out email updates. That is up there, and as we consider these further, and once we compile the information from our surveys, we'll be making that information public. Again, we meet the first Wednesday of every month at 135 Kais Road. We're asking for surveys to be returned before November 21st. They're available online if you don't happen to have one tonight, or if somebody wants to fill one in that's interested in just giving us feedback. This will air again this time next week if anybody wants to catch it. So there's also a lot of information on the work we've done on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I just want to say that Dan Rowley has put in a great deal of time and effort behind this presentation you just saw, and the committee has tried to support him. And we've had a lot of we've had a good time learning about all these options over the past, especially the past 4 or 5 months. So we want to take your questions, and I think that we're fairly well prepared to answer them, because we've been trying to answer them ourselves for a little bit longer than maybe you have. And so together, perhaps we can educate ourselves about our possible options. When you ask a question or you have a comment, if you would kindly step to the microphone, because this is being recorded, and if you aren't mic'd, no one will know or hear the question. And if you would state your name and your town address, that would be helpful. And so let me open it up and invite anyone who would like to make a question or a comment. Please come forward. Don't be shy.
I was going to be on TV. I'm Mary Taylor, 24 Riverdale Road. We bought some plots quite a while ago. Compared to what you listed as costs for the various new ideas, what is the cost for somebody who already owns a plot?
I don't think there's any. You're where you need to be.
I'm good?
You're good.
Oh, thank you. I'm above ground.
And that too. I don't know if you know, but there are information sheets in the back on the table when you arrived, and these information sheets contain a great deal of background regarding all these matters. So please pick one up on your way out. And let me also add, that we have surveys that we'd like to ask each of you to fill out before you leave, or if you can't do it tonight, take it with you, because this will help us remember what your opinions are. Sir, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Ned Perry, 362 Bedford Street, which you may recognize as a neighbor of yours. We appreciate the quiet neighborhood. First, I want to thank Dan for the presentation and all the work that you've put in, not only on this presentation, but for the 4 or 5 years that you've been developing the master plan. I also like to congratulate Tish on all the work that she does day in and day out, keeping the cemetery appropriate. I'm not sure who hires Epstein. Maybe all of you do, but whoever does, they do a terrific job. They've been doing a terrific job for 3 or 4 years. So I'm really here to thank you all for all you do for the cemetery and the work that's been done over the last couple of years on the road work makes the Veterans Day ceremony goes much smoother, no pun intended. And I think all the visitors coming to Concord and coming to the cemetery really see a much improved cemetery, both going up the hill as well as around on the master plan. My only comment is that the link on your website, I believe to the Lowell Columbaria is I think a better presentation than the presentation that you had on the Columbaria, and it's a very good link. And if you're considering options for Columbaria, if that's the right pronunciation, I think the location down that stairwell and down the ramp is a good one, and I would hope that it might be a curved one rather than the boxy ones. But we certainly would look forward to seeing drafts or plans. But thank you all for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned, for your very kind words. I want you to know they're very much appreciated. And what you say about Dan and Tish is certainly true. The town is really blessed to have such honest, hardworking, humane, friendly people working so hard for us. And yes, the Lowell, if you're interested in looking at columbariums, the Lowell video is a very good one. And it's unique in that the walls are curved rather than boxy. Are there more questions or comments?
Hi, good evening. Jerry Susi, 770 Main Street. I had the opportunity to attend your August meeting. And I also appreciate the work being done to date. Certainly Sleepy Hollow, aesthetically, Author's Ridge is just a wonderful place to wander around, and the historical value of the cemeteries, colonial era cemeteries, get overlooked in their discussion, but they're important too. As you know, I'm an advocate of green burial, and my wife Jean is buried at one of the only 2 green cemeteries in New England, Cedar Creek Burial Ground in Leamington, Maine. I'm wondering if in your exploration of these issues, if you've considered, or if you have, kind of also taken into account the environmental costs, if you will, of modern burial, whether it's the use of embalming fluids and materials that are non-biodegradable, concrete vaults and metal caskets and those sorts of things. I mean, I wondered if if you haven't, I would ask that you explore the environmental components of modern burial. And also, I don't know if the town has any kind of larger environmental or ecological policy or initiatives, but perhaps exploring green burial could also be done in the context of exploring an environmentally sustainable alternative. That's it. I won't keep going on about green burial. You know where I stand on that. And I think it's also a tremendous opportunity for people moving forward as well as for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on the committee have anything that they would like to opt to respond, to say in response to Mr. Susi's comment?
just that we appreciate your coming to us and all the information you've given us, because we were unaware of it at the time, to the extent that you've helped us to see a broader picture of it.
Yes, I must say that your coming to us encouraged us to include it in tonight's presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
If anyone, please come forward and.
Good evening, Phil Riley, 145 Concord Street. First of all, the second your remarks. I'm of the opinion that the citizens of Concord who use this lovely place should have the maximum potential number of options to bury their loved ones. I see, if they're willing to pay for it, I see no reason to constrain them. The one concern I do have, and I love the cemetery and have over the years spent many, many hours there, is the aesthetic impact of some of the structures that are under consideration, above-ground structures. And I know you would be very careful about the integration of these new structures into this lovely, as far as I'm concerned, historic garden. My wife and I have visited a number of cemeteries, and I must say I find, just personally, some of the modern columbaria quite jarring in comparison to the long-established stones in the cemetery. That doesn't mean I'm speaking against it, but a lot of concerns I might have would be dealt with things like appropriate landscaping, gardens, and shading. But I think most of us would agree that we have a very lovely place with a certain image that's very historic. It shouldn't limit future developments, but we should be mindful of the aesthetics of introducing new kinds of structures.
Let me ask anyone on the committee if they have anything they would like to say in response to Mr. Riley's comment. Or Dan or Tish?
I would just like to say it's helpful to hear what the interest level is in that, and then that information we will take, and then we'll really explore these options. We're at the point where we're working as a group, and we don't know that what we're working on really is what folks want. So it's good to hear the different perspectives, and we certainly anything that we do will be carefully considered with what's existing.
Yes, and the information sheets that we provided for you, both at the beginning of it and at the end, we stress that we don't want to do anything that would not be sort of in harmony with the already existing historic cemetery. It's one of the most beautiful garden cemeteries in New England, and we don't want to do anything to adversely affect that. And that's one of the reasons why we want further input from you. So please, are there any other comments or questions? We'd love to hear whatever is on your mind about the things that we've been presenting.
My wife always says I talk too much.
Go ahead, Mr. Riley.
As well as you're engaging in this very important activity, and I love the work that the Friends of the Cemetery do, I think the Melvin Memorial on the hillside, Authors Ridge, and those things are great historical moments within the cemetery. And I think we as a town could do a much better job of using the garden as a teaching moment for those who visit, be they school children or people from other communities. There's some good work has been done, but I think the historical aspects of the committee, whether it's scattered signage that along a route or something, could be very tastefully done and could really teach more than we teach currently for those who come maybe once in a lifetime in an afternoon.
Thank you. Comments from I know that
if I may.
Kimberly, this is Kimberly's area of expertise, so I think she has something to say.
I'm the newest board member, and with the Melvin Memorial, with the restoration, one of the things we will have is historic signage as to when it was first installed, a little bit about the brothers, where their remains actually are, and we'll also document the restoration process, so you'll be able to tell what has been restored and what is original. We hope to, I personally, I'd like to see that in other parts of the cemetery as well.
The Melvin Memorial is in its really final stages of restoration, and the gentleman who's been doing the work just is at the same time doing the figure on the top of the U.S. Capitol. So he's dividing his time between Washington and us. And the final touches, which include putting in the new slates, should happen hopefully if the weather holds this month. And so we're very excited about that. Are there more comments or questions? Don't be shy. That's why we're here. We enjoyed making our presentation and we worked hard to do it, especially Dan, but we want to hear from you. The survey which we produced asks you a number of questions, including your sense about these options. Each one, scattering garden, green burial, columbarium, and mausoleum. And there's two kinds of mausoleum, the public one and the family private one. And so when you fill those out, please remember that this will help guide us in terms of which proposals, which options we are leaning towards. Because we do hope to actually implement some of these changes, and we need to know what, in your sort of barometer of what the Concord townspeople want. Let me again encourage you to tell us what's on your mind about all this. You took the trouble to come out here after staying up so late watching the returns last night, and yet you're still here. So there must be some interest, and so please let us know what you're thinking. Well, then let me ask Dan and Tish if they have anything they would like to add to what we've said so far.
No.
I have nothing else other than thank you very much for coming out and getting involved with what we're doing, and I hope to see you on Wednesday night, first Wednesday in December at our usual regular meeting.
Yes. Do any of my colleagues on the cemetery committee have anything that they would like to point out or to suggest or say? Don't be shy. They're not usually very shy when we meet.
I think the one thing we could say about the family mausoleum option that has come to our attention a couple times in cemetery committee is that when the discussion revolved around the aesthetics of what we would like to see, if that were something we were to allow or explore, was that we would want something that fits with the Pope tomb, not anything too jarring or out of sync with that structure. So that's what our thoughts on that are so far. But we'd need, obviously, a lot more detail about what those dimensions or characteristics would be. Yep.
I know that members of the committee, Andrea in particular, have taken, Andrea and Tish, I think, took a drive visiting 2 or 3 other cemeteries, looking into how other cemeteries deal with mausoleums, columbarium, and finding their how they the sorts of things they require before a new one can be added. And I want you to know, we have found that they have very thorough and specific requirements, and we intend to in some way emulate that nothing added would be done without very strict oversight from, particularly if it were, say, a family mausoleum. It would have to conform with the historic context of the cemetery. So we're going to be very careful about that. Well, one last chance. Anyone else like to make a comment or question? Then let me remind you that if you haven't picked one up, there are surveys on the back table. If you'd like, there are pencils there too. You could fill one out before you leave. But if you are in a hurry to get home, please see there's an address to which you can mail the survey after you've completed it. We only ask that you get it back to us by the 21st of November. So if there are no more comments, are there? Then I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you very much for coming.